Okay, nice to see you guys back. Nice to see everyone. Thank you guys for understanding that I need to do some things at break. And normally when I say that I'm going to start at 10:45, I will be starting right at the time that I say. But today I had some things that I needed to take care of at break, so I'm not able to start at exactly 10:45. So thank you guys for understanding that. But normally you're going to see that I'm going to start and finish when I say. But there's impermanence that sometimes ekes in, right? So now I'm going to be sharing with you guys this topic of what is enlightenment so that you can understand this mental state more deeply as we make our journey to be able to learn the foundational teachings that's going to help you to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. So just like always, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask any and all questions that you like. In order to really learn in a class like this, you're going to need to listen with eager ears. This is something that the Buddha teaches, right? That you can't just passively learn to be able to get to enlightenment. If you're really interested in improvement in the condition of your life, in the condition of your mind, you're going to need to have eager ears where you're actively listening to what it is that I'm sharing with you, and that you're not believing any of the teachings, that you would like to be able to learn them, investigate them, examine them, reflect on it to independently verify and practice it. And that's what's going to lead to improvement in your life. So as we go today and all the other days, you're welcome to ask any and all questions as I shared, and you'll be able to get to that when you have these eager ears, that you're eagerly listening to what it is that's being shared. And then you don't believe anything that's being shared, but you learn it, reflect on it, and practice it. So this topic of what is enlightenment, I'm going to help you to understand it so that you can understand more about this enlightened mental state. And one of the things to first understand is that it's hard for you as an unenlightened being to understand what enlightenment is. It's a real challenge for the mind to understand it. I'm going to explain it to you, and I'll spend as much time as you guys like to be able to ask questions, and I'll help you to understand this enlightened mental state. But just understand that by the end of our conversation today, you're not going to know everything there is to know about enlightenment. It's kind of like I could sit here and describe chocolate ice cream for you all day long. And if you've never tasted chocolate ice cream, it would be very challenging for you to ever know what chocolate ice cream tastes like by just the description of it, right? The way that you really know what chocolate ice cream tastes like is you got to taste it, right? And then you know, and you can describe it. So I can describe for you what enlightenment is all day long, but for you to actually really know what it is, you're going to need to be able to make your mind, or you're going to need to be able to make your way to this enlightened mental state where you can start to see the qualities of enlightenment shine through. I'll talk about it and I'll explain it to you. You'll get a good sense of what it is. You're going to know more about what enlightenment is after we talk than you do right now, but just understand you're not going to know everything because the mind can be challenged to really understand this enlightened mental state. So the enlightened mental state is the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha. He was asked many times during his life, like, what do you teach? And he always said that he taught the elimination of discontentedness, the elimination of discontent feelings. It is this enlightened mental state. That's what he taught, is how to get to this enlightened mental state. So what this enlightened mental state is it is a mental state. It's able to be obtained during this life or at death. You can attain it at death. Some people will attain it at death. But ultimately, the ultimate goal would be to attain enlightenment during your life, because then you'll enjoy the rest of your life in that enlightened mental state. It's possible to attain this enlightened mental state in the human existence or in the heavenly existence. There's 5 realms that the Buddha taught. And again, I don't teach these as part of this class, but just understand that he did teach the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. And he taught these for specific reasons, which I share in other classes. But you can attain enlightenment in the human realm and in the heavenly realm. In the hell realm, the animal realm, and the afflicted spirit realm, those beings' minds aren't capable of being cultivated and developed to the point to actually get to enlightenment, but because they're in the cycle of rebirth, they're going to have opportunities, or they may have even had opportunities already in the human realm or the heavenly realm to be able to get to enlightenment. So now that you're in this human realm, it's the ideal existence to be able to get to enlightenment, because you experience painful feelings, pleasant feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And these tend to be motivators that in the heavenly realm, they only experience pleasant feelings in the heavenly realm. So they tend to be complacent and they don't really put forth the effort energy to be able to be determined and diligent to get to enlightenment. Where here in the human realm, we don't like those painful feelings. The sorrow, the grief, the pain, the displeasure, that tends to be the motivating factors that motivate somebody on the path to enlightenment, because you're interested in getting away from your stress and anxiety and the guilt and the shame and the fear and all these other discontent feelings. So you can attain this mental state in the human realm or in the heavenly realm. And having done so, the mind will be unshakable. It'll be calm and relaxed, but yet steady and stable. It'll be calm and relaxed, but yet attentive and alert. That oftentimes when we think about calm and relaxed, we think about vegetating and just kind of like, But in reality, the enlightened mind, it's calm and it's peaceful, but it's attentive and it's alert. It's sharp. It's focused. It's crisp. It's performing optimally. And you've done this through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Getting to enlightenment is not instantaneous. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is people think that the Buddha sat under a tree, he meditated, and he instantly got to enlightenment. And as you guys heard from his life story, this just isn't true. It was a 6-year journey for him to be able to get to enlightenment. So it's the same thing for you, that it's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And you know this to be true because everything you've ever done in life has been that way. Whether it's learning how to speak English, read, write, and speak English, it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Whether it's some job or occupation that you have, some unique skill that you have, it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that led you to that. And it's the same thing with the enlightened mental state. It's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And by the time you get to this enlightened mental state, the mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. There's no longer any discontent feelings. So all the sadness, anger, frustration, agitation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of these are completely eliminated from the mind. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the mind because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing it. What the Buddha discovered in that journey to enlightenment is he discovered these pollutions in the mind, which I'm going to introduce to you here in a moment. They're referred to as the 10 fetters. In a more general sense and at a high level, we refer to them as the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots. This is craving, anger, and ignorance. You're going to learn about this on Wednesday. I'm going to teach you about these 3 poisons. These are the 3 things that are plaguing the mind, but there's a more detailed description called the 10 fetters. He figured out what these pollutions are in the mind, and he figured out the tools and the techniques of how to eliminate them and get rid of them out of the mind. And as you do so, that's where the brightness and the radiance and the joy start shining through. It's kind of like a sun that has clouds in front of it. When the clouds start getting peeled away, the rays of the sun start shining through. So you could think about your mind as being already enlightened, right? That the mind is already enlightened, but there's these clouds, there's this pollution that's in the way. And what the path to enlightenment is it's a purification of the mind, where you're pulling away those pollutions, you're getting rid of those clouds, and now the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind can shine through more and more and more. And this is where you'll be able to experience the qualities of the enlightened mind. And we're going to talk about what those qualities are. So you will have eliminated craving, anger, and ignorance from the mind. You can attain this during this life or at death, and having done so, you won't experience continuous rebirth over and over and over again. And then this path to enlightenment, while enlightenment itself is the mental state, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind, where you're actually purifying the mind. Some people refer to enlightenment as happiness. I don't talk about it that way, even though there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state. But what some people are experiencing is they're experiencing what's called the jhanas. The jhanas are these 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. There's 4 stages of the mind going through to actually get to enlightenment, which I'm going to teach you here in a moment. But before you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there's something called jhanas. These are preliminary phases that the mind goes through where you're experiencing heightened qualities of mind. And as your mind's moving through these jhanas, when you get into that first jhana, there can be a lot of bliss. There can be a lot of excitement. There can be a lot of happiness there. But it's still conditional happiness. which you guys will understand what that is tomorrow. So some people are actually experiencing the jhanas. They're experiencing this bliss, this excitement, and they think that they're actually enlightened, because the difference between being off the path to enlightenment to being in the jhanas, it's like night and day. You can really see the improvement to the condition of your mind by the time you get into the jhanas. And when people are experiencing the jhanas, they're like, whoa, I've never experienced something like this before. I must be enlightened. And this is where you can have some people that will tell you that enlightened beings still get angry. They still get frustrated and they still get sad because they're in the jhanas experiencing this heightened quality of awareness. They're still experiencing anger and sadness and frustration, but they think they're enlightened. And they're describing enlightenment as that. So I can assure you, enlightened beings no longer experience any anger or sadness or frustration, but there's people in the world that think they're enlightened. They're still experiencing those aspects of the mind, and they're describing enlightenment in that way. So some people describe enlightenment as this ultimate bliss, right? But this isn't actually what enlightenment is. Enlightenment, the mind is calm and steady and focused and stable, but yet it's attentive and alert. So you might hear people from time to time refer to enlightenment as this ultimate bliss, where there's plenty of happiness. You're actually experiencing way more happiness in the enlightened mental state than you ever did in the unenlightened mental state. In the unenlightened mental state, you can only be happy when things are going your way. When you're getting what you want, you'll be happy. But when you don't get what you want, you'll be sad or frustrated or agitated. In the enlightened mental state, you can just always be happy and cheerful all the time. So these are some of the things related to enlightenment. Now to talk about some of the advantages of getting to enlightenment is that, as I mentioned, the mind will be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's a permanent mental state that you're experiencing. And then there's a high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind. And that's because the mind's performing optimally. You've gotten rid of that pollution out of the mind, so you fine-tune the mind. It's like that instrument that I was talking about earlier, that your string is too tight or too loose, it doesn't play beautiful music. Well, your mind's going to play beautiful music when you purify the mind and you tune it using the teachings of the Buddha. It's going to perform optimally. So you'll be able to see this focus and concentration and clarity and deep memory. You'll notice that none of these feelings exist in the mind anymore, that you've uprooted the causes and conditions of all the sadness, anger, frustration, and all these others, that you won't experience these any longer. And if you think about all the time that you've ever spent being angry and frustrated and sad and irritated or annoyed at different times in your life, you're going to get back a lot of time in your life to be able to do things that it is that you're really interested in doing, that you're not going to be sitting around feeling miserable or lonely or bored any longer. So all these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. You'll notice that you have deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment. You'll know the path to enlightenment inside and out, backwards and forwards by the time you get to enlightenment. You'll be able to describe it with ease because you're actually practicing it in day-to-day life. You'll notice that you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all situations. Where in the unenlightened state, those pollutions that are kind of plaguing the mind, you'll be bitter, you'll be hostile, you'll be resentful in some situations. You'll feel jealous and other feelings like this. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not going to be bitter and hostile and harsh with others any longer. You'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with everyone. Right now, it's kind of a challenge for you to do that based on what's going on in your mind. But when you start clearing out this pollution out of the mind, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with everybody. It doesn't matter. And then what you're going to notice as a result of that is that more and more people are going to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with you. That this is one of the things that you benefit from, is all these wholesome results coming back to you. That people aren't bitter and harsh and hostile with you. They're not argumentative with you because you're not doing that with other people. But as long as you're doing that with other people, they're going to do that with you. So eventually you'll get to this point where you can gradually move the mind to this politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. And you're not causing harm to anybody in the world. You're not causing harm through your intentions, your speech, or your actions, because you fully awoke to the wisdom of what does cause harm in the world, and you choose to not cause harm anymore because you see that wisdom. Where right now, with the lack of wisdom, there's probably certain things that you're doing that you don't even realize that are causing harm to others. And this is where things are blowing up on you, where you might think you have all the best intentions in the world, and you have a conversation with somebody and it blows up on you and you're like, whoa, what just happened, right? And your head's kind of spinning and kind of wondering, like, what just happened, right? Where by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have those kinds of experiences because you'll have deep wisdom about the path and you won't experience those kinds of things. Then because of not causing any harm in the world, your personal and professional relationships will be blossoming. They will be at ease. You won't have any hostility in any of your relationships at all. Right now, there's probably certain people that you get along with and you feel really great when you're around those people, but there's probably other people in your life that it's really hard for you to get along with, right? It can be a life partner, it can be children, it can be your parents or your brothers and sisters, co-workers, your boss. You might have real struggles in these relationships. And that's just because the mind is having these pollutions that I mentioned, the 10 fetters. And when you clear all that stuff out and you start functioning more optimally, you'll notice that your personal and professional relationships drastically improve. And this is part of the results and advantages of getting to enlightenment. In terms of what you need to do in order to get to enlightenment is there's core central teachings. And you're going to pretty much be learning all of these in this particular course. I'm going to be sharing all of these with you. That these are the core teachings. You're going to need other things too besides this, but this is what you would like to use to get started with, is the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts. I'm going to be teaching you all those things as part of this course. Then you like to learn the Brahma Viharas. I'm not going to be teaching them directly in this course. I do teach them in other programs, but I'm going to be referencing them in this course, so you'll at least get introduced to them at different times. Then you're going to need to learn the 10 fetters. I'm going to introduce you to those here in a moment, but you're going to need to learn those in more detail as you get going. These are the 10 pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. Then there's something called the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is a tool to fine-tune the mind, and I'll explain these to you here in a moment as well. Then you're going to need extensive meditation training, and we're going to get that started this week in the course. So these are the core central teachings that you'd like to learn, that you'd like to reflect, and then you'd like to practice. You're looking to get to wisdom. For me, I'm just your tour guide. It's you that's doing all the work. You are your own independent practitioner on a journey to enlightenment. And you can think of me like a tour guide. I'm just pointing out to you the things that you need to learn. You never believe anything that I share, whether it's in a book, whether it's in a class, a video, a podcast. Don't believe anything that I'm talking about, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. Someone convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. But in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to have wisdom. And in order to get to that wisdom, that's where you're learning, you're examining, you're investigating teachings. Then you're reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or false. And then you practice them, integrating them into your life. And this is where you're transforming your mind and uprooting the pollutions and started experiencing these wholesome qualities of the enlightened mental state. I'm going to show you more clearly tomorrow how to do this learning, reflection, and practice, because that's where I'm going to share with you the first teaching of the Buddha. Now we're just kind of talking about what enlightenment is, and you don't have a way to independently verify this right now. But once we get started with the true teachings tomorrow morning, that's where I'm going to teach you how to learn, reflect, and practice, so you can see how to independently verify these teachings and actually get to wisdom with all of these things. So these are the core central teachings that you'll need to know, and we're going to get started with that this week so that you can get going and headed in this direction. These are the 10 fetters. There's the lower fetters, and then there's the higher fetters. What a fetter is that during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your ankle, and then they would have you in this field. What a fetter is it's a shackle and a chain and a ball. And this is how they kept prisoners confined to a certain area. So when the Buddha discovered these 10 pollutions in the mind, he referred to them as fetters, because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state. That as long as these fetters are there, you're going to keep experiencing the anger and the sadness and the frustration over and over and over and over again. So the mind is fettered, it's bound up, it's being held down by these 10 pollutions. So I'm going to introduce you to some of them here, and then later on, you're going to be able to learn all of these later on in other programs and stuff like this. But just understand that everything that the Buddha is teaching you in one way or another is helping you to eliminate these fetters. Even the Eightfold Path that I'm going to teach you tomorrow, the 5 precepts, all these different things are helping you to eliminate these in one way or another. When you first get started, you're just learning the basic teachings and you're working in that direction. But then once you get into those jhanas, that's where you start focusing on these more directly. So here, I'm just going to introduce you to them so you can kind of get a feeling of what they're like and what they are. But then later, you're going to need to look at them more closely when you get further along on your journey. And just understand that this is what the Buddha is helping you to eliminate as part of his teachings. So let's go look at a few of these. The first one, personal existence view. You're going to hear about this tomorrow. What personal existence view is where the mind has a misunderstanding, it has a confusion, it has misperception. The mind thinks that this body is you or this mind is you. So the mind clings to a self-image. It clings to a self-identity. The mind clinging to this self-image, it wants to be perceived in the world by others in a certain way. So this is why, like, if you went to a social event and you spilled something on your clothing and you felt embarrassed, this is the personal existence view. The mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you're getting what you want, you feel happy. But when you're not getting what you want, you're going to have some painful feeling like embarrassment. Or if you've ever noticed like a pimple or a mole or a wrinkle or gray hair, or you start losing your hair and you look in the mirror and you're kind of shaken up by that, that's personal existence view. The mind's clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, wanting this body to appear to others in a certain way. And the mind's clinging to this permanence. If you got like some extra fat here or there, you might have been shaken up by this. Or if you were like me, when I was a teenager, before I'd go to school, I'd have the mousse and the gel and I'd be moving it through my hair and I'd try to get every little hair in the right spot. And I couldn't go outside until I had every single hair in exactly the right spot. And sometimes I would even miss the school bus. I was doing that for so long, I would show up and the school bus was gone, right? So this personal existence view is where the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way based on your self-image. Then there's the self-identity. What this is like your culture, your ethnicity, your nationality, your sexual orientation, maybe your job or occupation. The mind is clinging to an identity. And now you think that this is who you are. Like, I am German, or I am American, or I am Spanish, or I am Canadian. Any of this I am Brazilian, I am Lithuanian, I am Chinese, I am Japanese. Any of this I am that's in the mind, this is the identity that the mind is clinging to. So now if somebody says, all Americans are friendly and loving and kind and warm and gentle. Well, if you thought that I am American and that's the way your mind identified, or I am Chinese, or I am German, or I am Lithuanian, when they're talking about that, you think they're talking about me. So, wow, I feel so great. They're saying I am loving and kind and warm and gentle. Wow, I feel so great. But then it's only a matter of time before somebody says something negative and degrading and disparaging. Maybe you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody's talking about the people from the country that you're from, and they say, all Americans are blah, 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 or all Chinese people are blah, 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 or all Canadians, or all Germans, or all this, blah, 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 blah. And now you hear that, and now you're frustrated. Now you're angry because your mind is clinging to an identity, and you think that this is who you are, and now they're talking about me. Or say you had a job or occupation. Maybe you're a police officer or a lawyer or doctor. And now say you're like a police officer for a certain period of time, maybe 10, 15 years. And now you identify with, I am a police officer. But now you get injured or you get fired and you can't do that job anymore. Maybe you're doing something else. Maybe you're a food server or a taxi driver and you're disgruntled, you're agitated, you're annoyed, right? Because I am a police officer, but yet you're not doing that work. Maybe you retired. And then when you retire, you kind of feel lost in the world. You don't feel quite whole. Or maybe you had a boyfriend or girlfriend that you came together with and you identified with, I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend. And as long as you guys were together, you felt fine. But when you were single, You didn't feel comfortable. And maybe the mind wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship again. This is the personal existence view that the mind is clinging to. And the mind thinks the way to solve this problem, this uncomfortableness that you're experiencing when I am single, the mind thinks the way to solve that is hurry up and get right back into another relationship. And if I can assume that identity again, then everything will be fine. But you haven't actually solved the problem. The real cause of this problem is this pollution in the mind, where the mind is clinging to this self-image or this self-identity, thinking that this is who you are. So we're going to talk more about this tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the solution to this, of how to fix it. Okay? Then there's something called doubt. This is a fetter or pollution of mind. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha. And usually when people come to the path to enlightenment, you have doubt, right? You might have doubt about the Buddha, whether this person actually even existed. You might have doubt about his teachings. You might have doubt about the community of people that you're around, and like, can these people really be supportive and help me to be able to get to enlightenment? You might have doubt about me, whether I can help you to actually get to enlightenment. And you might even have doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment. Can you actually really do it? Right? So if you have doubt in your mind, this is going to hinder you or obstruct you from being able to get to enlightenment. And if you have doubt, it's completely normal. Most people have doubt when they first come to the path to enlightenment. I know I did. But the way that you get rid of doubt is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way you get rid of doubt is you investigate the teachings. You examine them. Because if you investigate and examine the teachings and you don't believe them, you will see that they're true, that they lead exactly where the Buddha said they do, to this improved mental state. And that's how you get rid of doubt. By the time you get rid of doubt, you won't be enlightened yet, but you will have seen significant amount of progress to the condition of your mind in your life, that you will know without a doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind and an improved life. And you'll have more work to do at that point, but you'll have eliminated your doubt. It's just a matter of time of continuing to be dedicated and determined and diligent and continuing to walk forward on the path. So the way you get rid of doubt is through investigation and examining of the teachings. You will never see anywhere that the Buddha says, just believe me or have faith in me. Right? It's about acquiring confidence, that you would like to have confidence in the Buddha, confidence in his teachings, confidence in the community, confidence in your teacher, and confidence in your own ability to get to enlightenment. And by the time you've made significant progress on the path, you'll have that confidence. So what you do is you take this doubt and you harness it. You turn it into an inquisitive mind that, yeah, you know what? I do have doubt. This isn't me now, but in the past, I don't know whether the Buddha actually existed. I don't know if these teachings lead to enlightenment or not. I just don't know, right? And now you need to roll up your sleeves and you need to sink your teeth into it and figure it out. And as you start examining the teachings, that's where you'll see, oh my goodness, this stuff is true. It works. Look at this situation you were just in, and your mind is normally angry and frustrated and agitated and irritated, and you have that same situation, and you see your mind's calm and peaceful. And you'll know, because you know in situations where you normally get upset and you get frustrated. So as you're training your mind with these teachings, and you see in that same situation where you used to get so upset and so angry, now your mind's just completely peaceful. Wow, you're going to notice those things, and other people are going to notice it around you too. So that's how your doubt slowly gets eliminated. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. What this is that there's certain moral conduct that you have right now that is harmful. You might not see it that way, but there's certain things that you're doing in the world that's unwise. The way you're speaking with people, and maybe the way that you're functioning with your bodily actions too. And by the time you get rid of your wrong behavior, you're going to need to improve your moral conduct to a certain degree, where you're not causing harm through your speech or your actions. The Buddha is going to teach you this as part of the Eightfold Path, about the natural laws of existence, about how to ensure that you're not causing harm through your speech, through your actions, or your livelihood. And having eliminated any of those things from the Eightfold Path, which I just taught yesterday, but I'm going to teach tomorrow as well, is you will have eliminated your wrong behavior, that you won't be causing harm. Because if you're looking to get to a peaceful and joyful life, it doesn't matter how much you meditate. If you go out into the world and you're bitter, harsh, and hostile with people, your life's not going to be peaceful. And your mind's not going to be peaceful because people are going to be yelling at you. You're going to have arguments. You're going to have frustration. All these things are going to occur. But when you can get your arms around some decent moral conduct, which the Buddha is going to teach you how to not cause harm through your moral conduct, you'll see that you're improving the way you interact with others, and now other people are improving the way they interact with you. And then what wrong observances is, this is like rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, that the Buddha never taught any of these kinds of things. If your mind thought that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship leads to enlightenment, then this fetter is still there. Oftentimes people have eliminated that portion of the fetter before they even come to start studying with me. Because as you see, I don't do any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. There's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you that's going to help you on your journey to enlightenment, right? There's no amount of strings that I can tie on your wrist that's going to help you to get to enlightenment. Because the way you get to enlightenment is you need to cultivate wisdom. And rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't lead to wisdom. So even though you might go to a Buddhist temple or a place that considers what they're doing Buddhist, if they're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, this isn't part of the teachings of the Buddha. Those people may firmly believe what they're doing is the teachings of the Buddha, but when you get back to his original teachings and his original words, you will see that he didn't do any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. Because what he's doing is he's guiding you to cultivate wisdom. And you can't cultivate wisdom through rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So whether you decide to go do those things or not, it's up to you. Everything in your life is up to you, right? But there might be situations where you're hanging out with your family. Maybe it's the holidays. Maybe they would like to go to the church or to synagogue or to the mosque or something like this. And you're just participating with the entire family, and you guys are enjoying your time together as a family. But your mind knows that this wafer that goes on your tongue, or this little bit of juice that you drink, or this water that's being sprinkled around, it's not going to help you get to enlightenment. But maybe you're just hanging out with your family and making it a social event, right? But your mind understands these things don't lead to cultivation of wisdom, and they don't lead to enlightenment. So for some people, they really enjoy this aspect of the teachings of the Buddha because they've done rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in the past. And they see that it doesn't lead to an improved condition of mind or an improved condition of your life. So if you get to the point where you know that these things don't actually lead to improved life, then you've eliminated that portion of this fetter. Then there's sensual desire and ill will, which you're going to learn about in other parts of the course. We're going to be talking about these. Essentially, what sensual desire is the mind longing and yearning, having craving, desire, attachment, which I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow. And then there's this ill will, or this anger, this hostility, and this bitterness. Then there's these higher fetters. I'm going to focus in on number 8 and number 10. What number 8 is number 8 is conceit. This is part of what we refer to as the ego. If you've ever learned about the ego, this is where the mind might be measuring and comparing people, putting yourself above people or putting yourself below people. And now maybe you talk down to people when you think you're above them, or maybe you put yourself below people like a boss or something like this, and you feel shaken up when you're around that person. This is because of conceit. The mind is measuring and comparing and putting yourself above or below people. And this is going to hinder you from having wonderful relationships in life. Because when you have ego, when you have arrogance, when you have pride and boastfulness, people are going to push you aside. They're not going to be interested in being around you. So when you get rid of your conceit, you'll be able to look at everybody as being equal, and you won't judge other people. You won't be trying to compare, what do I have versus what do other people have? You'll have eliminated that from the mind, and then you'll be able to reside with all beings harmoniously. But as long as this conceit is in the mind, you're not going to be able to do that. And this conceit is actually coming from our previous existences. When we were all in the animal realm, we needed conceit. We had to have conceit. We couldn't have survived without conceit. Because when we were like a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female. They're going to teach us how to hunt. They're going to teach us how to survive as wolves and be better wolves. And our pack of wolves is going to flourish because the alpha male and alpha female are helping us. When we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd. because she's going to show us where's the migration paths, where's the watering holes, where's the food. And we needed to follow her. If we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was, we wouldn't have survived. So we needed to know who's above us, and we needed to know who's below us. So in our animal existences, our mind was conditioned to have this conceit where we're looking for a pecking order. And that's what we tend to do, even in the human realm. When we come into the human realm, our mind being conditioned this way, we'll go into a social event like a party, and you might be trying to find a pecking order. Where am I in this pecking order? But this is just going to hinder you from having great relationships with everyone around you and having a calm and peaceful mind. So when you get rid of this conceit, you won't be judging and measuring and comparing people. And it takes a while to get rid of this. That's why I introduced it to you here. It's going to take you multiple years. There's actually a chapter in the book that I talk about the ego and how to eliminate this. So you're going to need to gradually wear this away and work on it, where you just see yourself as being equal to everybody. You're not trying to figure out this pecking order, and you're not judging other people and looking down on them for certain things that they're choosing to do. And then there's ignorance, this number 10. This is like the fetter of all fetters. This is the whole reason why the mind continues to be unenlightened. And this is the whole reason why all the other fetters are actually in the mind. Now, most people translate this as ignorance, and I tend to not use this word. I use the unknowing of true reality, or lack of wisdom, confusion, misunderstanding. The mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It lacks wisdom in the unenlightened state. For example, in the unenlightened state, we firmly believe that other people are causing us to be angry or sad or frustrated or irritated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. We firmly believe that. But that's because of our lack of wisdom. We don't have wisdom in the unenlightened state to understand that it's our own mind that's causing these feelings. And I'm going to help you to be able to see that tomorrow, right? So it's because of this ignorance, this unknowing of true reality, the misperceptions and misunderstandings about the natural laws in the world, that the mind continues to stay stuck. As long as there's a lack of wisdom in the mind, you'll keep experiencing the same problems over and over and over. So if you're noticing that you're having the same problems over and over within your relationships or within your life, it's just a lack of wisdom. You're not a bad person. You haven't necessarily done anything wrong. It's just that the mind lacks wisdom. So this path to enlightenment is all about cultivating wisdom so you can antidote and remedy and eliminate this ignorance. And that's what's going to allow you to get rid of all these other fetters. If it wasn't for the wisdom that you're going to bring into the mind, you wouldn't even know about these fetters and what's actually plaguing the mind. So bringing in this wisdom will actually kind of unlock the ability to completely eradicate all these pollutions and actually get to enlightenment. So this ignorance is like the fetter of all fetters. It's the one that's keeping everything else stuck in the mind. So do you guys have any questions so far about anything that I'm talking about? Anything you'd like to ask? Those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Janae has another question here. Let me take off the mic. Janae's asking, so the 10 fetters are literally holding back the mind from realizing final wisdom. And that's true. Yes, Janae. If the 10 fetters were not there, there is nothing stopping the mind from reaching final wisdom. Exactly. If it wasn't for the 10 fetters, the mind would actually be enlightened. And you're born with a lot of these, and then there's others that you actually acquire as you're going through life. When we talk about conditioning of the mind, and the mind has been conditioned, this is what we're talking about, is the 10 fetters. The mind has been conditioned. It's taken on this pollution. Now, some of these you're born with, but others you acquire over time, like ill will. This is anger, hatred, and ill will. We're not born with that. When we go into the nursery at the hospital, we don't hate other babies, right? We also tend to not have conceit at birth either, where we're not kind of like measuring and comparing the other babies at the nursery, right? We're not looking at them and like, hey, my crib's better than yours. My mittens and my hat look better than yours, right? We do this as adults as we start to acquire more and more material possessions. So some of these you're actually born with, like sensual desire. You're born with this one. But the others you start accumulating over time. You're also born with ignorance or unknowing of true reality. So because of this, the mind is plagued. But when you get rid of this conditioning, when you purify the mind and the mind becomes unconditioned, that's where the mind is experiencing the enlightened mental state. Looks like we have some more questions coming in. Yeah, take your time. No worries. And you can keep that with you over there. You might need it throughout the day. Yeah. Yeah, keep it with you.
I actually have two questions. If
sure.
It's,
yeah, have as many as you like.
So the first one is about something that you said just right now, about the further that we get through life. So do you need to have it and get rid of it in order to get to enlightenment? Or is it also a way to educate for it for a young age, like to pass it to the next generation by educate to not have it in the first place, or you need to have it in order to get rid of it, in order to...
Yes. So each being that is born, they will have these fetters to a certain degree. And early in life, they're not as pronounced, they're not as deeply rooted, and they're not as significant. So this is why if you learn early in life, it actually is a lot easier to get to enlightenment, and your mind can actually experience an improved life much earlier. So like during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were children that were getting to enlightenment at the age of 7. Right? So I started training my son at the age of 6 formally, but I was doing things even when he was an infant that was helping him to be able to train his mind. But it wasn't until age 6 that I started formally training him. Now he's 12 years old. This boy is so peaceful. Like he very rarely gets discontent. Like even like now when he's having difficulties and I need to like take video games from him and stuff like this, he's just like, okay, yeah, I'm just not going to have video games for a while. He just understands, you know, and I'm not punishing him. I'm just trying to get his attention so he can understand, you know, that, hey, this is really significant. You need to like take some of these things out of your life and think about what it is that you're doing, and get some more wisdom. So, you know, you can train early in life and you can experience so many more improvements because the pollutions aren't deeply rooted. And because you're training earlier in life, they'll be more easy to get rid of, because they're not as significant and they're not as deeply rooted.
Thank you. So that actually led me to the second one. Mm-hmm. And what I was thinking while you talked all of it, mm-hmm. is I'm trying to maybe reason about it. I don't know.
Try to make what?
To make it rational or something like this for me. Mm-hmm. But if there is people around the world for the last thousands of years that learn it and put their life to give it, to teach it other people, and mm-hmm. it's make your mind in this position. Do we see these people not only teaching, but actually, what I'm trying to understand more is the separation between this study, lifestyle, or whatever, to the real life. I don't want to call it real life, but society.
Yeah. I understand what you're asking. So these teachings and this wisdom of how to get to enlightenment, it's something that a population of people can learn and take in, and then it can be shared with other people in a way that that population of people has the deep wisdom of how to get to enlightenment. And now a place like Thailand, where these teachings have been for 800 to 1200 years, you see a lot of people that are learning and practicing the teachings, even if they're not studying with the original words of the Buddha. These teachings have made their way into the Thai culture, that they're being taught on a day-to-day basis. Maybe not formally, but they understand them to a certain degree. And now you've got a lot of peacefulness in a place like Thailand because people are practicing the teachings fairly closely. And this is why some people call Thailand the land of smiles, because it's really easy to smile when you're joyful. When your mind's joyful, it's really easy to smile. So you see a lot of Thai people smiling a lot, right? And the Thai people, the way that they practice these teachings is they don't go out into the world and pressure other people to do them, because your peacefulness isn't going to come from pressuring someone else to do something. They have these teachings. They know that they have the teachings. They practice them joyfully. And if other people would like to come here and learn them, great and wonderful. And if they don't, hey, that's fine too. And we just know that those people are going to continue to be angry and frustrated and irritated and annoyed and things like that. So these teachings can slowly permeate in the world. And as more and more beings understand the path to enlightenment and practice it, essentially what we would be doing is creating heaven on earth. That if slowly but surely more and more people got to enlightenment, we wouldn't see the wars that we see. We wouldn't see famine and disease and poverty and murders and rapes and people being taken advantage of and things like this. You wouldn't see these kinds of things. You would just see lots of care and love and kindness and things like this in the world, and people helping each other. So I think that's what you're asking, right?
Yes, but even I take it further, like, so why not to be in the positions of influence instead? Like, I'm trying to understand why this kind of people not going to influence where they have the influence, and like, yeah, because we see a lot of war miserables and this kind of thing, because the people that are in the higher position in everywhere, in economics, education, politician, are not the qualified one most of the time. So that's the separation that I'm actually trying to understand.
Are you
why not to take influence?
Are you asking why the teachings haven't been widely spread throughout the entire world, and why we don't see more people practicing the teachings?
Or maybe take the actions of change and not just to teach.
I see. So the craving, anger, and ignorance, these 10 fetters and the poisons that are in the mind, they're very strong and they're very potent. And when you don't have strong teachers in the world that really understand what enlightenment is and how to get to it, then the teachings degrade, right? Since the lifetime of the Buddha, the teachings were very bright and very vibrant in the world because he had deep wisdom about what these teachings were. So during his lifetime, countless people were getting to enlightenment. And shortly after, for about 500 years after his life, the teachings were very vibrant in the world. But then this teaching slowly degraded over time. And the Buddha predicted this during his lifetime. He explains these 500-year cycles that the teachings would go through. And we just ended the last 500-year cycle where he talked about how degraded the teachings would actually be, that people wouldn't even understand what he actually taught during his lifetime. So we just came out of that period of time. But obviously there are people that do understand what he taught. There are people who are in the world today that are enlightened. And those individuals are interested in seeing more and more people getting to enlightenment, because we call enlightenment awake. It's more fun when everybody's awake, right? An enlightened being can have fun no matter what. But when everybody is awake, wow, it's really great to be in a community where people are loving and kind and warm and gentle and friendly and respectful. It's great being in that kind of environment. If you were as an enlightened being in any other type of environment, you could still maintain your peacefulness and your joy. But it's wonderful when more and more people are awake. So there's plenty of people in the world that are enlightened to a certain degree or awake to a certain degree, and they're interested in seeing other people get to enlightenment. But one of the things that you know as part of the path is that you can't force somebody else to get to enlightenment. Everybody has to decide for themselves. So what we do is we put out signs, we put out notices that we're having these classes and courses and things like this. And then whoever shows up, they can gradually learn, they can gradually understand. And it's only been recently that we've really gotten the teachings into the English language. And that is an international language that now the entire world can understand. The teachings have been in the Thai language for quite a long time. And the Thai people understand them to a certain degree. But if you don't know Thai, you don't have the teachings very clearly. But it's just recently that we've been able to get them into the English language so that now they can truly spread throughout the world because we now have this international language. So if I probably took a survey here, we probably have at least 4, 5, 6 different countries represented here. And then the people online, this is being broadcast all over the world right now, which is what the Buddha wasn't able to do during his lifetime because of the lack of technology. So now with our international language, with the ability to easily travel in the world, and these teachings can spread all through the world. Like I was just in Mexico last month teaching these teachings in Mexico. And then also that we have the internet and we can send information in a minute, in a second. We can press a button and boom, it's all the way across the other side of the world. We have the perfect environment in which these teachings can now really flourish in the world and permeate in the world. But still, it comes down to individuals pulling the teachings into their life. The teachings can't be pushed into somebody's life. They have to be pulled into your life. Is that everything for now? Yeah? Okay, great. I think you have a question over here.
Yeah, it's more about the the kind of structure of it, in the sense of everything seems to have a mathematical dimension to it. There's 3 of this, and there's 4 of this, and there's 8 of this, and there's 10 of these, of which 5 are higher and 5 are lower, and that's whatever. And it's just to understand, I guess, for certain mindsets that appeals, that kind of structure and interrelationship. But just to understand from your perspective why the Buddha would have felt it helpful to create almost this algorithm for enlightened life. Mm-hmm. Was that what the Indian kind of way of doing things was at the time? Is there a kind of interrelationship between them all? There's almost a kind of complete model that operates here. And linked to this, do you think it appeals to certain mindsets who like these kind of mathematical constructs more than others who like a more kind of free flow, artistic way of navigating life?
It's actually much more practical than that. The reason why the Buddha taught with lists, in numbered lists like this, is because he taught in an oral tradition. And there's 3 things that you do in an oral tradition in order to get people to learn and understand your teachings and retain them to be able to then be shared throughout the world. Is the first thing you do is you tell stories. When you tell stories, people are going to remember that. They're going to remember the moral of the story, and then they'll take on a certain teaching that's going to help them in life. The other thing you do is you talk in repetition. That's why the Buddhist teachings are in 45 large volumes of books, and that's not even everything he taught, but that's what we have left, because he repeated himself over and over and over again. And that's how you get people to remember your teachings in an oral tradition. And then the third thing you do is you give lists. Because if I teach you the 10 fetters and you can remember 8 of them, you're like, I know there's 2 more. What is it? I know there's 2 more. What is it? Oh, yeah, that's right. Restlessness and ignorance. That's the ones that we forgot. Restlessness and ignorance, right? So if you give out lists and people start remembering the list, if they remember a portion of the list, they'll know that they don't have everything because they didn't quite get to the number of the 5 precepts, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the 8-fold path, the 10 fetters. There's all these different lists that helps people to actually remember what it is that you taught. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And is there an interrelationship between them all? Is there a kind of a model that says if I start with the 3 universal truths, I work through then to the 4 noble truths, 8-fold path, the 5 precepts actually link in with the 3rd of the 8-fold path, of which there's a derivative of 3. Is this all, could it be portrayed as one kind of model, mm-hmm. or not such?
Yes, actually, the way that I teach you is I teach it to you in an order that you need to learn it in, the sequencing. This is something that the Pali Canon doesn't have. The Pali Canon is just, here's his teachings. There's really no organization to them at all. But what I've done as part of this book series, among other things, is I've laid it out in a sequence of that you need to actually learn it in order to gradually build up your practice. And then what students have done, students that have learned with me, is they've built like flow charts or mind maps and things like that, and they show how they all connect in. And I've seen different students do this in different ways. ways. But yeah, that's exactly what happens, is like this thing plugs into there and this thing overlaps that. And you can see that very clearly when you start learning the teachings, and it kind of helps you to conceptualize the teachings that way. So if you would ever like to create one of those for yourself, you're more than welcome. Or if you'd like to look at some of the others that students have done, I can connect you with some of the people that have done that. Okay. So now what I'm going to share with you guys, now that you guys understand, or at least were introduced to the 10 fetters to a certain degree. Now remember, there's a lot more detail behind each one of these. There's actually a retreat that I teach in August that explains to you what the fetter is, how to, or what the symptoms are of that fetter, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you eliminate it. We spend like an hour to an hour and a half on each individual fetter. Right. So I just spent like 3 minutes on each fetter just to kind of introduce it to you, so you know that this is the underlying thing that you're working to eliminate. But then I'm going to focus you on the core central teachings. And then later you can go into these in more detail. Like there's a course coming up in 2 weeks from now called Experiencing the Jhanas in the 4 Stages of Enlightenment. And in that course, we spend more time on the fetters. And then there's a retreat in January that we spend a little bit more time on the fetters. And then in August, that's where we spend the most time on each individual fetter. Okay, so this was just like a little light introduction to them. Well, once you start understanding the fetters, then as you're eliminating these fetters, your mind is actually moving through 4 stages of enlightenment. It's called stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. These are the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then there's something called a Buddha, which isn't a stage of enlightenment. And the Buddha referred to these stages of enlightenment this way for a reason, and I'll explain to you as we go. Okay, so when you eliminate the first 3 fetters, your mind will enter into the first stage of enlightenment. And at this point, your mind has significantly reduced your discontentedness. Whatever the anger and sadness and frustration or whatever you were experiencing before, it's significantly reduced at this point. It's a mere fraction of what you once used to experience. And you'll know that you're in the first stage of enlightenment. And this is really pivotal, because once you get into the first stage of enlightenment, your mind won't regress backwards. When you're prior to the first stage of enlightenment, if you got complacent, your mind would regress backwards. But by being in the first stage of enlightenment, your mind actually won't regress backwards. So this is a pivotal time. Also, an individual having died in this stage of enlightenment, they won't be reborn down into the lower realms any longer. If they die in this stage of enlightenment, they're going to come back into the human realm. And we refer to this as a stream enterer, because once you get into this first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time, either in this life or some future life. This is why we call it a stream enterer, because once a log enters the stream, it's only a matter of time before it gets to the ocean. It's just going to take a certain amount of time before that log gets to the ocean. It's going to get there. So once you enter the stream, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. So that's why we refer to it as a stream enterer. This is more generally referred to as the first stage of enlightenment. And you've eliminated 3 fetters. Okay. Then in the second stage of enlightenment, we refer to this as a once returner. This individual, if they die, they're only going to come back to the human realm one more time, and they're going to get to enlightenment in that life. So you guys could have easily been stream enterers or once returners in your last life. And now this is your life to actually get to enlightenment, right? This stream enter, when I say there's no more than 7 rebirths, it doesn't mean you have to be reborn 7 times. It could be 1 time or 2 times or 3 times, but a maximum of 7, right? And in this second stage of enlightenment, you've already eliminated the first 3 fetters, and now you've thinned out number 4 and 5. Right? Meaning that they've been reduced. So if you're noticing that you're not as interested in sexual activity anymore, this is like thinning out your central desire. Or if you're noticing that you're not as angry, you're not as bitter or harsh as you once were, maybe when you were a teenager, that's because your ill will has been thinned out a little bit. Right? So this is how somebody thins out these. They're not eliminated yet, but they're thinned out. So that's what a once returner is experiencing. And they're experiencing another reduction of discontentedness, where being off the path to enlightenment to being in the first or second stage of enlightenment, it's like night and day. You can notice this very clearly. Your mind's more stable, you're more steady, you're more calm, you're handling your situations much better in your day-to-day life. You will know that you're in one of these two stages of enlightenment. And then from there, there's the third stage of enlightenment. It's called the non-returner. This individual has eliminated the first the first 5 fetters. All the lower fetters have been eliminated from the mind. And this individual is only experiencing discontentedness like once every 2 or 3 months. It's very rare that this person is getting discontent. And when they're getting discontent, it's very infrequent and it's very insignificant when it's happening. It can actually be like 30 seconds to a minute. And it's not even like anger or rage. It's just like a little bit of ickiness, a little bit of uncomfortableness. Other people probably aren't even going to know that you're discontent when you're in this third stage of enlightenment. That internally, you know that there's a little bit of ickiness, but externally, people don't see anything at all, right? So by the time you get to enlightenment, there isn't even this little bit of ickiness in the mind. It's completely liberated, completely free. But in this third stage of enlightenment, there's still a little bit of discontentedness, about once every 2 or 3 months, maybe once every 6 months. It's very insignificant when it's occurring, and it's very infrequent. And this is why in this stage of enlightenment, you need to stay very dedicated and very diligent, because you can become complacent. Because the discontentedness is so far away from each other and is so insignificant, you can become somewhat complacent in this stage of enlightenment. So it's important to stay dedicated and diligent when you're experiencing this, because your mind is not yet enlightened. If you die in this stage of enlightenment, you're reborn into the heavenly world and you get to enlightenment there. Being in the heavenly realm, it's not a permanent existence. You still need to get to enlightenment. And those beings in the heavenly realm, they tend to be complacent and they actually don't get to enlightenment. But if you were in the third stage of enlightenment as a non-returner and you die, you will reborn into the heavenly realm and you'll get to enlightenment there in that existence. But then the ultimate goal for everybody would be to get to this stage of enlightenment. We refer to it as an arahant. This is the way they referred to it during the lifetime of the Buddha. An arahant is someone who's completely purified the mind. They're actually enlightened. And from that point forward, they'll never experience any discontentedness ever again. And they won't be reborn anywhere. And you'll know that your mind's enlightened because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no anger. There's no sadness, there's no frustration, there's no agitation, there's no annoyance. All of that stuff is completely eliminated from the mind, right? So having purified the mind of the 10 fetters, your mind will only be experiencing peace and joy. It'll be bright and cheerful and uplifted. Even the slightest little annoyance isn't in the mind. It's completely comfortable and at ease. Okay, so these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. It's stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. And I just refer to them as the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment because it's a lot easier for everyone. But you might hear other people using these terms or other terms related to these. Okay? So then there's an individual called a Buddha. A Buddha is an arahant. They've completely purified their mind of the 10 fetters. But this individual has done it in a unique way that we refer to them as a Buddha, or a fully perfectly enlightened one. So a fully perfectly enlightened one, a Buddha, is an arahant. They've purified the mind, but they've done it by themselves. The average arahant, the average enlightened being, they're going to need teachers and guides. You're not going to be able to get to enlightenment by yourself. You're going to need help from somebody. You're going to need guidance. A teacher is the person holding the light and showing you the path, but you're the one that's walking the path. You're not going to be able to figure it out on your own. An individual who became a Buddha, they would have gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They would have then dedicated their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people would get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they would preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. These are the 3 main criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. And this type of individual is very rare in the world. The last one that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. And the world's not aware of any Buddha that has existed since his lifetime. So those are the first 3 criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. Then the thing that allows the individual to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves is this one right here, that they have a profound memory. even in the unenlightened state, a person who's going to become a Buddha is going to have a deep, profound memory. So, for example, for you guys in your life, you probably have residual memories of your kind of like early times, like in your childhood. Like if you think back to your childhood, you kind of have spotty memories, right? And this is because you have a limited capacity in your mind, that if you are going to experience new things, you have to delete old files in order to store new files, because maybe you have 500 gigabytes in your mind, or maybe you have a terabyte, 1 terabyte, right? And now as you experience new things, you have to delete these old files in order to store new files. So if you think about the last couple of years in your life, you can probably remember pretty much the things that you're doing fairly much in detail. But if you think back to your childhood, it's just like spotty memories. This isn't what an individual who's going to become a Buddha experiences. They have an unlimited capacity, that they remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. And this is what allows them to get to enlightenment by themselves, is they accumulate wisdom over multiple lifetimes, and that all comes together to be able to allow them to get to enlightenment in their last life without the help of any teachers or any guides, because they have this profound memory. They have an unlimited capacity in their mind. Okay, so that's one of the criteria of an actual Buddha. They also can quickly determine the condition of somebody's mind, and they do this with their students. This is the way that they help their students, is by observing their mind and giving them teachings that are going to help them to be able to get to enlightenment. So this is something that a Buddha will have, but they only share those teachings as a way to help their students to be able to get to enlightenment. Then lastly, what a Buddha is going to do is they're going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings, because their ultimate goal is to help as many people get to enlightenment as possible. So they're going to be teaching through their actions, that they don't just teach through their words. They do teach through words, but a Buddha is wise enough to understand that they're teaching just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So it's not like they're going to teach to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, but over here, they're going to be disrespectful, right? They're not going to teach to be joyful and happy, and then over here, they're going to be angry and disgruntled. This isn't the way their mind works. They're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings, and they're able to help their students learn through their actions, just like they do through their words. Right? So these are the criteria of what makes a Buddha. And we refer to them as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because their mind is perfectly enlightened. An enlightened being is functioning in the world perfectly, where they're not causing harm to others, but we don't refer to them as fully, perfectly enlightened. And the reason why is that when you learn from a teacher who's not a Buddha, you might actually retain certain things that aren't really the path to enlightenment. Like maybe you got to enlightenment, but only 90% or 80% of what you're doing actually is what led to enlightenment, where there's still like an extra 10 or 20% of things that didn't actually lead to your enlightenment, but you're still doing those things. And you might even think that those things contributed to your enlightenment, right? But by the time an individual who's a Buddha gets to enlightenment, they don't have any extra baggage around, that if they try a certain meditation and it doesn't work, then they discard it and they get rid of it. But then when they try certain things and they can see that it's improving the condition of their mind, then they know that's part of the path. And then they know that this is what they need to teach in order to get to enlightenment. So that's why we refer to them as fully, perfectly enlightened, because by the time they get to enlightenment, their wisdom is very deep and very profound. And what they know that leads to enlightenment, they're able to teach that in a penetrating way that's going to help other people be able to get to enlightenment. So that's why we refer to them as fully, perfectly enlightened. Okay, so this is what a Buddha is, and this is the 4 stages of enlightenment. So not everybody's a Buddha. This is what some people will tell you. They'll say everybody's a Buddha, but the Buddha didn't say that, right? It's just other people today are saying that, and that's their ego thinking that they're an actual Buddha, when this is actually what a Buddha is. Okay, so one of the ways that I teach is I teach you about what something is, but then I teach you what something isn't. This is something you'll kind of see me do from time to time, right? So now that I've taught you what enlightenment is, now I'm going to teach you a little bit about what enlightenment isn't. Enlightenment isn't experiencing these discontent feelings. If you experience discontentedness, you know your mind isn't enlightened. And here, what we're referring to is conditional feelings. If you experience conditional pleasant feelings, painful feelings are neither painful nor pleasant. What conditional happiness is is that you can only be happy based on some condition. If I get a raise at work, I am happy. But if I get laid off, I'm angry and sad and frustrated. If I have a boyfriend or girlfriend, I'm happy. But if we break up, I'm sad or frustrated or irritated, right? If I have a certain amount of money in the bank, I feel happy. But when that goes down, your mind is sad. This is called conditional happiness. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is beyond this. Your mind can be happy when your bank account's here, when it's here, when it's here, when it's here, when it's here. Your mind isn't basing its feelings on the bank account. Your mind is experiencing unconditioned happiness and unconditioned joy. These are mental qualities that are just always in your mind, right? So if you're experiencing any of these conditional feelings based on some condition, then you know your mind isn't enlightened yet. Then if you have a craving or desire for other people to know that you're enlightened, you're not enlightened. One of the best ways to know someone's not enlightened is they're going to tell you that they are. So if you're out and about somewhere, like at a yoga studio or at a retreat, and someone rolls up and they're like, hey, by the way, I'm enlightened, you know right away they're not enlightened, right? Because this is like boastfulness, this is arrogance, this is pride. So one of the best ways to know someone's not enlightened is they're going to tell you that they are enlightened. Because if a person's enlightened, their mind's peaceful and joyful, go be peaceful and joyful. Why you need to come around here and telling us that you're enlightened? What are you looking for? Admiration? You want us to bow down to you? Is that what you want? There's something that the mind wants, right? So if the mind wants something, then they're not enlightened, right? Just go be peaceful and joyful. If you're peaceful and joyful, go be peaceful and joyful. You wouldn't be coming around here bragging and boasting that you're enlightened, right? So if someone's bragging and boasting that they're enlightened, then they're definitely not enlightened, okay? If you notice complacency or a lack of motivation, initiative, enthusiasm, or a willingness to do something where you just feel dull, you just feel lethargic and, kind of lazy, your mind's not enlightened yet, right? Because the mind's going to swing like this in the unenlightened state. You're going to chase things. And then when you get tired, your mind's going to swing to the other side and you're going to feel dull and lethargic. You're going to be lacking motivation and enthusiasm. You're going to be lacking ambition. So when you're in the middle and your mind's enlightened, you'll be able to maintain your enthusiasm and your motivation and your ambition. And you'll also rest too. You'll get some rest, but you won't feel dull or lethargic. You'll be active and attentive to the things that you need to do in your day-to-day life. You won't feel dull and lethargic about the things that you're doing. So this is the way to know that your mind is not enlightened. Okay, so any questions on enlightenment? No? Okay, let me see if we have anything online. So sometimes what I do here is I teach the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment take about 10 minutes to explain it to you, but I'm just looking at the clock. And it's a little bit after 12. So sometimes I teach this here, sometimes I don't. So there's going to be plenty of time for you guys to learn the 7 factors of enlightenment. And it's not really something that you need right away at this point in your development on the path to enlightenment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to forgo this. But if anybody would like to learn about it, it is in chapter 3. And I can teach it to you either privately or in any of the other classes. And it's been recorded at different times. But I'm going to pause here so that you guys have a nice long lunch together to spend some time, maybe get your printouts at the printer and stuff like that. I'm going to start back up at 1:30, which is an hour and 25 minutes from now, essentially. So enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you guys after lunch, okay? So thank you for your questions, and we'll see you after lunch, okay?